turn 5 then, and take another urban dice out of the bag. The game really seems to be going in favour of the Allies at the moment. The Normans have lost 20 army value points so far, and at 21 that's a third of their force, and they'll have to take an army morale test. Whereas the Anglo-Danes have lost none, although they've hardly got into the battle, and the Vikings have lost 8, I think it is, and they don't take a test until they get to 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, a lot of Normans again. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right, so still dependent on this last one, which is Vikings. No Anglo-Danish dice out of the bag. So we roll the 6 Viking dice. Right, there's a 1, 3 2s. They're going to find it hard to use those, I think, but let's see what we can do with them. And a 5 and a 6. The only unit that I can spend a 2 on is this unit of the housecarls here, and that's because they're normally discipline 3, but this chap reduces them down to 2. The other discipline 3 unit I had was the berserkers, who died horribly long ago. So what that means is that I can only put a double on them. I have to waste that 2. Now, in a game where you're playing with a camp, you are allowed to put multiple bonuses on, but I haven't got a camp. Maybe I'll do a game with a camp in the future, but that has to be wasted, and the 1 was wasted obviously, so I've put the 5 on the shieldmaidens next to that unit. I don't think I'll break that cavalry unit just with this melee alone, so they will then be able to join the melee, and it'll be an additional bonus for the supporting unit. And the 6 I've given to this unit over here because these cavalry are 1 away from breaking, and if I can get rid of them, I'll tip the Norman army over the 1/3 value, making them at the end of this turn take a army morale test. But that's the best I can do. Now the Normans have got, what is it, 5 dice. They've managed to create a nice sort of defensive line here in preparation for the Anglo-Danish arrival. But there's 1 solitary Norman unit there that's on the brink of destroying that unit. So while the Anglo-Danes have no dice over here, it would be quite useful to put a dice on them. So the aim of the Vikings really is to keep as many dice occupied over here, and I don't think they've managed it, having to waste 2 dice. But we'll see how it goes. And while I'm on the subject over here, there's a couple of things. I've been reviewing some of the video footage I took earlier in the game. These feared here have the ability spears, which I was telling you about right at the beginning, and that hasn't come into play yet. I had forgotten it, I'll confess I had forgotten to use it, but luckily what had happened when they got into melee, they had already taken a loss, which meant they weren't fresh, so the spears ability, which would have denied those cavalry impact, wouldn't have applied anyway. So that was a mission I made that didn't matter. But one thing I did make, a really glaring error, was that I group moved someone over here. I think it was these 2 figures here, these 2 units here, and I group moved them as a manoeuvre, and you can't do that. You can only group move as an advance, and I moved these diagonally across. But I'm going to let it go. But aficionados of the rules will probably have been screaming out at that point when I did that it was an error. So apologies for that. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference to the way the game plays out. I didn't do them a vast favour. So let's roll the Norman dice and see how they get on. Okay, so the Normans have 5 dice. It's pretty good. 2 6s, a 5 and 2 3s. Right, well, the first thing that's going to happen in this phase is that this spell is going to take place, because that is a 2 there. So I've put the double 3 on these guys so that they have got a bonus in the melee. They'll have impetus in the melee and they're fresh cavalry, so they'll get an extra dice for that, and that's the best they can do. But they are going to then get possibly clobbered by these shieldmaidens piling into the melee. The 6s, I've spent 1 on this melee here, and 1 to see if I can finish off those Anglo-Danes there. Now the 5, an aspect of the rules I haven't dealt with in any of the games so far, will crop up over here. I've put the 5 on this melee here, not because I think the Normans are going to come out of this fight very well, but because they will initiate, or they will activate before those Vikings will, because the Vikings have got a 6, and you are allowed to break off from melee, and in fact it's a good idea to do that if you're impact cavalry. What you try to do is break off and then charge back in again, and by moving you'll regain the impact ability. But in this case, because they've got a larger movement rate and they're only facing an enemy to their front, the cavalry are allowed to do a manoeuvre and break off. Now they're discipline 3, requiring 5 to do a manoeuvre, so I put the 5 on them, and they will be able to break off, thereby wasting that 6. So that's quite a sort of clever thing to do. Now, I said that it's a good idea to do that with a lot of cavalry, but so I was thinking about doing it over here with some of these melees as well, but it's a waste of a 6 really. I might as well stay in the fight and use the 6 as a bonus rather than just use it to do a manoeuvre. But the 5, definitely. If I had more 5s, that's what I'd do with some of the other cavalry. Right, so first things first then will be this melee here between the Viking housecarls and the Norman cavalry. So, the housecarls are strength 4, that gives them 4 dice. They have impetus because they have an activation dice, and they have a bonus because they have a double 2, so that will give them 6 dice. The knights, the Norman knights, have a strength of 3. They have impetus because they have an activation dice. They have a bonus activation dice because they have a double 3, and they get an extra 1 for being fresh cavalry with impetus because they still don't have any casualty markers on them. So it's going to be 6 Norman dice against 5 Viking dice. So both sides have armour. The Normans can't use their impact because they haven't moved. Right, the Vikings got 3 5s, a 4, so they're the important ones, and a 3 and a 2, which we're going to ignore. The Normans have a 6, a 5, a 4, a 3, and 2 2s, which we're going to ignore. Right, so it looks like pretty much a stalemate. So the Norman win there. The housecarls can reduce that down to a 5, making that a draw. That's a draw anyway. The Viking win here, the Normans can reduce that down to a 4, making that a draw as well, leaving us with one Viking win requiring a discipline test because it's not double, and the Vikings have got the Normans have got a discipline of 3, and they get a 5. So no result from that melee. Okay, so we turn all these dice to a 1. Find it. There we go. And the next thing to do on the active side will be the 5 there. So the shieldmaidens are going to move forward with the 5, and we work out the respective dice again. So the shieldmaidens have a strength of 4, and they have a bonus dice, or a dice for impetus, because they have an activation dice, so that gives them 5, and they have a second unit touching the enemy, that will give them 6. The Normans, on the other hand, only have their strength of 3. They've now used their impetus, so it's going to be 6 against 3 this time. So the shieldmaidens don't have armour, but they do have the shield wall ability, so as they're fresh at the moment, they do effectively have armour because they're fighting to their front. Right, 3 4s and 3 3s, opposed by a 4, a 3 and a 2. So we take those 2 away. That's a draw. That is a win for the Vikings, but a discipline test. That is a win but double, so an automatic kill. And there's a Phantom 2 there, so that is a win but another discipline test. So there's definitely 1 kill, and the Vikings have to take 2 discipline tests, and they are discipline 3 as well. And they pass both of them, 5 and a 6, so they got 1 kill. So we turn that dice there to a 1, and then the next thing to do is the Norman 5, which is this one here. And this break-off, I've never played one of these in a game I've shown you yet. Basically it's a manoeuvre. You turn 180 degrees and then you can move your full distance. So you don't deduct the 1 DU for moving backwards. You're not effectively moving backwards. So it means I can move this group 8 inches back, and then at the end of it you can turn around again and face the enemy, so you haven't got your back to the enemy. So it's quite a neat move. Take their casualties with them. That goes to a 1, and that is quite a clever thing for the Normans to do, because now there's a 6 on this unit here. It's a valuable dice, but what can the Vikings rather do with it? If they advance, they can only move 6 with the bonus, so they can't reach the cavalry. They would have left. They would be left spent, as it were, making them vulnerable, possibly to, I don't know, threat from here. They're not going to be able to make use of that dice anyway. And I don't really want to get them too close to the cavalry. In fact, I think it's going to be wasted. Further in the turn, I won't be able to do much with them anyway. So I think what I will do is possibly move them as a manoeuvre. I'll move them their full distance backwards, I think. So they're going to end up, I can move this a little bit, they're going to end up about here. Just throwing the dice away really, but my hand has been forced by the the Norman player. And the next thing to do in this phase is this melee up here. So the Normans have a strength of 3. They have impetus because they have an activation dice. They are fresh cavalry with impetus, and they have a bonus because they've got a 6. So they've got 6 combat dice, whereas the Anglo-Danes have a strength of 4 and nothing else because they have no activation dice, therefore no impetus, and because they're not fresh, they're not going to have the shield wall ability either, or be able to use their spears ability to negate the Norman impetus. So it'd be 6 against 4. 5, 4, 4, 2, 2 and 1 against a 6, a 6, a 2 and a 1. So we can take those 2 away, so aren't included. See what we got. Looks like the Anglo-Danes have put up a fight. There's a win to the Anglo-Danes there and there, a double there, so that's an automatic kill, and a double there, so that's an automatic kill. So the Anglo-Danes already have 3 casualties, so that's going to make 5. So they are destroyed. But here and here, they have forced the Normans to take discipline tests to avoid casualties. So the Normans have discipline 3, but they have a commander attached, so I've just got to get 2 or better. And I do, 4 and 3. So, first thing I have to do is remove this unit. I take a dice out of the bag because they haven't used the dice yet, and this unit has an army value of 4. Take these away as well. Now the Norman cavalry is obliged to pursue because they're mounted. So they go straight forward. Oh, yeah, and that goes to a 1. They'll be fighting without impact. But before I forget, there are discipline tests required on both of these 2 units here, which are in the route path of the field. So these guys are discipline 5 down to 4 because they have a commander attached, and they get a 2, so they get a casualty. Now that is important in this melee that's about to happen because they have the spears ability, but they've lost it now because of that casualty. And these guys here get a 1, so they've failed as well. Right, now I've just checked the rules again, and I was slightly misleading in what I said. Even though they aren't fresh now, so they won't get, that won't stop them getting using the spears ability. They wouldn't have been able to use the spears ability anyway because they didn't have impetus in a pursuit melee, regardless or not of whether you have an activation dice on that unit. You don't get impetus in a pursuit melee, and not having impetus means you can't use your spears ability anyway, so regardless of whether they had that casualty or not, they wouldn't get their spears ability. But the Normans don't have impetus either because it's a pursuit melee, and without impetus you can't use the impact ability, so wins will not be automatic kills. So that's quite a good example of how the impetus ability works, or the impetus characteristic. It's crucial to have impetus in a lot of times in order to be able to make use of the unit's melee abilities. The Normans will be fighting with their strength of 3, and that's it. The Anglo-Danes, on the other hand, have a strength of 4, but they also have an adjoining unit here, which will give them 5 dice. So it's going to be a roll of 5 dice against 3. Some high rolls there, 2 6s, 3, a 2 and a 1, which we can ignore, against a 5, a 4 and a 1. Right, so a win requiring a discipline test, and the same there. A more than double, so automatic kill, and a phantom 2 there, meaning that is a draw. So there's 1 definite kill and 2 tests to take here. So this is an example of why it's good to have a leader attached, because they're discipline 3 down to 2, so as long as they don't roll 1s, they'll be okay. Well, they roll 1 1 and 1 6, so they've got 2 casualties. Right, so there are 2 casualties on the Normans, meaning that they're no longer fresh, obviously. I have to take a dice out of the bag and put it with a 1 facing up for that unit there, but not for this unit here. This unit here wasn't fighting a melee. It was merely lending its support to that unit there. So you don't waste a dice on them, but they have now used their dice for this turn. And it's back to the bag now to draw out another 11 dice. No, it's not, sorry. There's a dice of 6 over here that I haven't shown you or forgot about. So we fight a melee over here, and the Vikings they're opposed to don't have an activation dice against them, so they have no impetus. So these have a strength of 4, these have a strength of 3, 1 for impetus, 1 for being fresh cavalry with impetus, and 1 with bonus for the 6. And this is another example here. Because these Vikings don't have impetus, they can't use their shield wall ability. Oh, I don't think they can. I'll check that and make sure. Yes, they can use their shield wall ability. I think I made that mistake earlier in the game as well. So spears can't. If they've lost their impetus, you don't use the ability spears, but shield wall is retained. So 6 against 4. Oh, strong roll for the Normans. 2 6s and 2 5s I can see there. And the 3 and the 1 won't matter. Oh wow, against a 3, a 2 and 2 1s. Right, that's pretty devastating. So, at the moment there are 4 doubles there, which would destroy the unit, because they've only got a strength of 4. So, the only thing to do, if I reduce any of those down by 1, it's still going to be doubles, it's still going to be a big kill. But here, if I reduce that down to a 5 using the shield wall ability, it's no longer double, which means I can take a discipline test and hope to win it. But I'm throwing for a 4, 5 or 6, because they're not particularly well disciplined. They've got a discipline of 4. Crucial roll here then. And they get a 1, so they're destroyed. So this is making this battle in the centre here really interesting. The Vikings are now destroyed. They didn't have a dice against them, so I had to take a dice out of the bag. They have an army value of 4, meaning the Vikings have now lost a total of 12 army value, and at 15 they have to take an army morale test. The mounted troops are obliged to pursue, so they contact the shieldmaidens, and a pursuit melee is fought immediately. not using any impetus. So in this case, it's a strength of 3 against a strength of 4. Both sides, I beg your pardon, the Norman side have an adjacent unit touching the shieldmaidens, but in this case they themselves have another unit touching them, so the Normans don't get a bonus for that unit beside them. So it's a straight up roll of 3 for the Normans, 4 for the shieldmaidens, and both sides can use some kind of armour because neither have lost. Sorry, they don't have impetus, but impetus doesn't matter in the use of the shield wall or their armour, so they can both use armour. 4 against 3. Right, the Normans have 5, 4, 2, and the shieldmaidens have 6, 4, 4, and a 1. So this Phantom 2 can't beat that actual 1, so we can ignore that. There's a win for the Vikings, a draw, and a double, making it that an automatic kill, and a discipline test. No, not discipline test. Now, this is interesting. I could either drop that down to a 3, meaning that I require 2 discipline tests, or I could drop that down to a 5, meaning that's a draw and I only take 1 automatic kill. I'm not very good at odds, but as they are only discipline 3, that's pretty reasonable odds, so I'm going to drop this one down to a 3 and take 2 discipline tests, requiring 3 or better to save me. Right, so it didn't work out. I still got 1 kill, but I think that was a gamble worth taking. So I have to put the casualty against the Normans there. No need to take any dice out of the bag because they're already beside the units. And the Normans are holding on. They're not over their 3rd army value yet. But at the same time, Vikings are putting up a stiff resistance. Annie Norman's shieldmaiden figures are playing a good game, and this battle in the middle is turning into quite an interesting little conflict. But anyway, 11 more dice out of the bag for the next action phase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And this time it's a predominantly Allied side win, but with quite a few Anglo-Danish dice there. So we roll these. What's that, 7? Yeah, 7 dice first of all. Oh wow, right, the Anglo-Danes, the yellow dice have turned at last. 2 6s and 2 5s, and the Vikings have got 6 and 2 2s. So those we already know from the previous phase. I've got nothing I can spend them on now because the housecarls are discipline 3 down to 2, and they're the only units, so they have to be wasted. But we'll see what we can do with a lovely row of 6s there. Right, so I've given the 6 to that unit of Vikings there, and the same thing has happened with the other 6 I put on the Vikings, and the Normans broke off. Isn't going to happen this time, because no matter what dice the Normans put on, they can only break off as far as those guys, which will still leave them within charge distance of those when they come to activate the 6, and then they would be hit without impetus. So I'm going to have to put a dice on there if I can get one, but I can't break off from that melee. Now with the Anglo-Danish dice, it's all very interesting. These crossbowmen here have a range of 5 DU, and they are just within about half an inch of those guys there, so they could shoot at them. So I'm going to put a dice on them for them to manoeuvre around here, so that they're out of the crossbowmen's field of fire, which is directly in front. And similarly with the cavalry, I'm going to manoeuvre them. I can manoeuvre with these guys because they're discipline 3. These guys are discipline 4 down to 3, and I'm going to manoeuvre them so they're not within charge range of these spearmen or dismounted knights, but they are facing them. They can't manoeuvre into a charge, so I can't do a charge with them. So I want to keep them out of charge distance of the Normans, but ready to attack them in the next turn. And the crossbowmen can't move and fire, so they're safe from crossbow fire if I move them out of the way. And over here, one of the 6s definitely got to go on here, because they will get a bonus for the 6. They won't be able to use their spears because, because they're not fresh, but they will still have shield wall, but they will get a bonus for that dice there, for that unit there. And they've only got to inflict 1 more kill on these Normans to push the army over the morale testing point. And the other 6, I didn't want to put anything over here for the moment until I've created a bit of space for myself to manoeuvre. So I could have either put it on these guys to move them across, but I thought, why not put them on all these archers here? They're Viking, but these ones are Anglo-Dane. They're not going to take part in the battle unless I move them out now. The Normans are never going to attack them. So bring them out and start to get closer to those crossbowmen where I can throw some arrows down on them. Unlike the crossbowmen, archers can move and fire, but even moving they won't get within range, because at the moment they're in difficult ground, which just makes them fall short because they lose a DU in movement. So even with that bonus 6, I can't reach them to shoot at them this turn, but it will get them ready for next turn. So now I've just got to see how the Normans can respond to that with their dice roll. Ooh, not very good at all. A 1, no use. 2 2s. That I'm going to be able to use that luckily on that unit of cavalry in melee, because they've got a commander with them, so they're D3 down to D2. And a 4. Right, let's see what to do with that. Okay, so I've put the 2 2s on that unit there, so both sides in that melee will have a bonus. The Vikings for the 6 and the Normans for the double. And the 4, it's a bit hard to know what to do with, because a lot of the cavalry are discipline 3 but undrilled, therefore they need a 5 to manoeuvre. But those guys there are down to discipline 2 because of the commander, so I think I'm going to put the 4 on them, and probably, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get them in. I wasn't sure whether to put them into that gap there, or to bring them round to here somehow so that they're facing that threat there. But I think this is more of an immediate threat, thinking about it. I've changed my mind, so I think I'm going to put them, sort of manoeuvre them over a little bit, just shuffle them over so that they're ready to get into that melee next turn. So, we start off with this melee here, because this is the only 2 facing, so we start with that melee. Right, so the Normans have a strength of 3, impetus, fresh cavalry with impetus, and a bonus for the 2, so that gives them a total of 6 combat dice. And the Vikings have a strength of 4, impetus gives them 5, and a bonus for the 6 gives them 6 as well, so it's going to be 6 dice against 6. Okay, 6, 5, 3 and 3 2s against 5, 5, 5, 4, 3 and 1. Right, so these end ones don't matter. So we currently have a Viking win, a draw, a Norman win and a Norman win. Both sides have some kind of armour. The Normans can reduce that down to a 5, making that a draw, and the Vikings have shield wall, meaning they can drop one of these down. So a similar thing as previously. No, not similar things previously, because there's no choice here. If I drop that down to a 4, it's still a discipline test. But if I drop that down to a 3, it no longer becomes an automatic kill. It becomes a discipline test. So the Anglo-Danes have got to take 2 discipline tests. They are discipline 4, but down to 3 because they have a commander attached. Both fail. Right, so they've got 2 more casualties. They've already got 1, so they're not quite broken yet. That was bad rolling. Right, so that was a bit nasty for the Vikings. So they've already got 1 casualty. They get 2 more, meaning they're close to destruction. That gets turned to a 1. These 2 2s get turned to 1s. Next up is this 4 here. So all I'm going to do with those, I can't manoeuvre into combat, and I'm more than a DU shift that way, so I can't charge these guys here. But I am going to manoeuvre them, because they're discipline 3 down to 2, so I'm allowed to manoeuvre them, and I can put them, they will literally slide through there, just room to do it. So I'm going to put them like that, so they're a little bit back from the line, and that goes to a 1. Then we have these 2 5s. So the cavalry, I want to keep them. These guys are heavy foot, so with a bonus they could get to there. So I'm only going to manoeuvre them so that they're sort of facing them but outside of their maximum charge distance, so that they're safe this turn. These guys here are heavy foot, so they can only move 4, so they can't move very far at all. So I'm just going to turn them around so they're like that, and make sure that they're not in the field of fire of those crossbows. Turn that to a 1. So that's them done. And next up we'll do this 6 here, this interesting little melee. So the Normans don't have impetus, they've already spent their dice, so they just get 3 combat dice. The Anglo-Danes have a strength of 4. They can't use their spears ability. Haven't used that this game yet because they aren't fresh either. But they have a strength of 4. They have a bonus. They have impetus because they've got an activation dice. They have a bonus because they've got a 6, and they have another unit in contact with the enemy, so they get a 7th. So the Normans are going to be lucky to survive this. 7 dice against 3. Whoa, right. 6, 5, 2 4s, and a 3, a 3 and a 1, but none of those are going to be included. I'm going to take the top 4 against a 6, a 3, a 2, and a phantom 2. So even without, they've got armour. Let's see if I can do anything. That's a draw. Get rid of that. At the moment that's a discipline test, but there are 2 automatic kills and they only need 1 to break them, so even trying to work out what to do with the armour, but even using the armour they're still destroyed. Right, so these Norman knights are going to come off the table. At the end of the turn, the army's going to have to take a morale test. This gets turned to a 1. The Anglo-Danes aren't obliged to pursue, but there's absolutely no danger to them if they do. And in pursuing, I increase my chances of killing the Norman captain there. So they are going to pursue, and the captain will be killed on a 5 or a 6 rather than a 6. And it's a 2, so he escapes. Now he can move, he's got to move towards the closest unit or away from danger, which both happen to be in the same direction. So he gets a movement of 5 DU, which is 10 inches. So he can't quite... I think it's marginally out, so I'm going to put him about there. Then the only other 6 to move is the unit of archers down here. So they move 3 inches normally, but they're in difficult terrain, takes them down to 2, back to 3 DU, not 3 inches, back to 3 because of the bonus, so they'll get to about there. And I don't think, I'm not sure in the rules, but I don't think you can shoot at individual commanders. You can certainly contact them in melee, because they are just within range of him now. But I'm going to say that they can't. And that is the end of that action phase. So more dice to come out of the bag. I just move these guys forward before I take the dice out of the bag, because they did pursue, so they have to move their full distance. They're heavy foot. And left in the bag are only 5 dice, 3 of which are Anglo-Danish, so it's the Allies that have the initiative for this last phase. A useless 1, and a 6 and a 3. So just have a think about that. Okay, I've got nothing I can spend the 3 on. It's the usual Anglo-Danish problem that they're all very poorly disciplined units, but the 6 I'm going to put on the select field here and probably manoeuvre them off in this direction here. So now it's up to see what the Normans can do. 4 and a 3. Well, I've got a unit of knights over here right on the end, on this side of the stream. So I might as well put the 3 on them and advance them a little bit further forward. They can shift a little bit. And they might get into a position where they can either threaten these guys or cross the stream again and get into the Vikings' rear ranks. There's no point in putting the 4 on them because they still couldn't manoeuvre because they're undisciplined. I've forgotten the word for it now. Undrilled, which means they'd require a 5 to make a manoeuvre. And so I put the 4 over here, and again they're undrilled, so I'm just going to move them up a little bit further behind that unit there, probably next to that unit there. Right, so first thing to do then, doesn't appear to be much on the table. It is going to be that 3 over here, so we'll do those first of all. So there's not too much to do in this last action phase of the turn then. Move these first of all. These are on a 3, so they move forward 8 and they can shift to that way. The hill is open terrain, so it's not going to worry them. That goes to a 1. Next up I'm just going to move these knights here. This commander can just be moved out of the way as long as you keep him beside the unit he's attached to. They're going to join those guys there. That goes to a 1. And then there's these select feared here. They've got a 6. They're heavy foot, so they can move 2 plus 1 for the bonus. Gives them a 6-inch movement. So I'm just going to move them. That's the furthest corner there, so they can do that. That goes to a 1 as well. Right, and that is the end of turn 5, other than the end phase where we've got to roll for morale and rally and so on now. Right, first thing to do then is to move the commanders and attempt to rally, and I seem to have left this guy sort of unattached for some reason. I'm not sure whether he was attached to them or them, but it doesn't matter because he's going to move now, and I'm going to attach him to them and try to rally off that casualty marker there. So they are basic feared, discipline 5, now down to 4, back to 5 for the casualty, so they need 5 or better to get rid of that, and they roll a 4, so no. Same thing there. King is going to try and get rid of that one there, so they need a 5 or 6, and they roll a 5, so that can come off. And the other commander for the Anglo-Danes is way over there, and I think I'm going to leave him with them. Now in the case of the Vikings, this chap I want to move up a little bit further, so he's going to move to there. That chap there is going to try and remove that casualty, so they are discipline 3 down to 2, back to 3. Cock dice, and they roll a 6, so that can come off. And I wish I'd rolled that for these guys because these need a 6. They're discipline 4 down to 3, 4, 5, 6, and they get a 4, so they don't do it. And then from the Norman standpoint, I'm going to move this chap across to there to try and get rid of that marker. So they are 3 now down to 2, back to 3 for the... Oh, and they roll a 1, no good. And the only other Norman casualties are way over here, so I can't do anything about them. And I want to keep him attached to them, keep that fight going, and he's unattached at the moment. Yeah, so I think I'm going to put him on that middle unit there. See how that works. Right. Okay, then the next thing to do would be to shift any units that are fighting to their flank, but there aren't any, flank or rear. Then you take all the dice off, and then we roll for the army morale for the Normans. So we've got to go around each unit of the Norman army, testing them for discipline. So these guys here are discipline 3. I think I'm going to call that a 1. It's slightly cocked, but we'll call that a 1. So they get a casualty. And then these guys here, they don't want to do the same because they'll be off the table if they get another one. They're discipline 3. Oh yeah, lucky, 4. Okay, so they survived. These guys here are discipline 3 down to 2 because of the attached commander, and they get a 5. Those guys there are discipline 3. They get a 2, so they're casualty. These are quite important for the mounted troops because they lose their bonus for fresh cavalry with impetus if they have markers on them. Right, discipline 3 again, and they get a 3, so they're fine. Discipline 3 again, and they get a 5, so they're fine. Chaps in front with the flag there, they're 2 because they've got a commander attached, and they get a 4, so they're good. Right, the dismounted knights are discipline 3 as well. So this one here is 3. They get a 4. The one in the middle has a commander attached, so they're 2. And they get a 2, so they're okay. And the crossbowmen are discipline 4. And they get a 5. So I think that's everything. Yep, so now we're on to turn 6.